What's up, guys? It's Lefty here, back with another video. Switching gears a bit from college basketball over to baseball. It's the night before opening day, and I want to go over some of the types of bets I'll be targeting this season and kind of what to look for when betting totals in baseball. I also have an opinion on a game tomorrow for opening day. I'll discuss that briefly at the end of the video. But before I get into that, I want to discuss a topic that could potentially have a significant impact on this season's games. Some of you are probably already aware of Major League Baseball's decision to implement a new ball. Now, I've been following this topic, and there's just a ton of misleading information. And although I'm no expert on the science or physics behind what difference a ball can make, I do know the smallest change to a baseball can result in big changes over the course of a full season. It's a complex topic, but I'll try to summarize it the best I can and put it in simple terms, which I'm great at because simple terms is really the only way I know how to describe most things. But, we've all heard the term juiced balls. Well, MLB basically wants to dejuice the ball this upcoming season. Um, we've seen games in recent seasons look more like home run derbies than actual games. The home run rate has steadily climbed the past few seasons, and even though everyone knew the ball was the culprit for the increase in dingers, it wasn't really known what about the ball exactly was the reason. It wasn't until like 2018 ish, late 2018, MLB finally commissioned a committee full of scientists and statisticians that identified the ball's decrease in drag as the reason. Um, Drag is a force that opposes an object in motion. In this case, a force that opposes a baseball's motion through air. And MLB was really forced to make a change after the home run rate reached, somewhat of a peak in 2019. And if you remember, this was the season we heard a lot of pitchers start to complain about the smaller, thinner seams on the ball that they were tougher to grip. And when you combine that with the change in batter behavior as teams and hitters started adapting to this new analytical craze on home runs being correlated to wins, which really shouldn't be a surprise. You hit home runs, you score runs, you win games. But we saw last year in the postseason a 19-0 win streak by teams who out homered their opponent. And that streak wasn't snapped until Cody Bellinger robbed Tatis Jr.'s home run in Game 2 of the NLDS. So, the reason for the home runs really boils down to two factors: batter behavior and a ball with less drag. We know the ball with less drag has those, smaller, skinnier seams that pitchers started to complain about in 2019. Now, MLB's defense to this is simple. They're going to increase the drag on the ball. We won't know for sure how this new ball will impact performance until the season gets going, and but that's not stopping people from speculating and there's tons of sites that are jumping to conclusions regarding the new ball and the potential impact, and most of it's just nonsense. Or flat out wrong. ESPN did an article that was just so lazy and wrong. It's so full of misinformation. I'm not going to link it below, but if you want to look for it and search for the title, it's called Spring Training Scoring. Home runs are down with new balls. And in the article, to support their claim, they cite runs per game and home runs per game this spring training. But they completely failed to consider that this season the games were shorter, and the innings often ended with runners on base with less than two outs. All because of this new rolling innings rule, which basically allowed the managers to you know end the inning whenever they wanted, or whenever the pitcher had at least 20 pitches and wasn't in the middle of an at bat. Um, the average spring training game was roughly 8 innings this year compared to 8 and 3/4 innings in 2019. That's a 6.5% decrease in innings played. So instead of the 10.5% decrease in runs per game that ESPN stated, it's really only a 4% decrease in runs per game. But again, that can absolutely be attributed to the rolling innings rule. And also, this spring season had limited minor leaguers compared to years past, and all this can, is very likely had more of an impact than the new ball they claim to be the sole reason for. Um, and, just because it's ESPN writing something, doesn't always make it accurate either. They're a big media company, obviously, but they take shortcuts for sure. So, what do we know about this recent spring training season is that there was a lot more information available. Major League Baseball's ball tracking technologies were in place compared to previous seasons. This spring training, StatCast was installed, producing publicly available data at some of these spring training parks. The reason for this is they wanted to obviously test the new balls, but the tricky part is Major League Baseball used a combination of the old balls from last season and new balls that will be used this season. So, although there's a bunch of data, it's not separated, all neatly with games played with new ball and games played with old ball. But we can still dig around and come up with some helpful information. Um, in spring training, home run rates per contact are generally a touch lower than that of the upcoming regular season rates, and that's probably because of differences in quality of competition, weather, or other factors. But what's interesting, the two rates tend to track each other closely. We've seen regular season home run rates increase, while spring training rates have also increased. The correlation between the two over the past 15 years is very, very close. Um, Looking at the numbers for this spring training, the home run per contact rate this spring was higher than it's ever been in any other spring on record. Which again, this is what makes the ESPN article such crap because spring homers aren't down at all. They've actually reached a record level, and in 6 out of the past 7 seasons, the regular season rate has mimicked the same direction that the spring training rate did. So, in other words, what happens in spring training is likely to continue over into the regular season. And again, it's crazy because this spring ball, MLB cycled in some of these new balls with higher drag. So it's just weird to see, the complete opposite of what they expected. And, there's comments from pitchers like Blake Snell and Garrett Cole who have both said they've noticed a difference in the new ball, raised laces or thicker laces on the ball, allowing better grip and more snap-on breaking balls. And the spring training data does follow this. The higher drag balls or the new balls also seem to have more movement. Fastballs gained an extra 0.45 inches of vertical movement. Curveballs added zero point 0.3 inches relative to the lower drag balls or the older balls. The new balls also have a higher whiff per swing rate, almost 3 percentage points. So this doesn't conflict with what Snell and Cole said, but it just makes it that much more confusing because batted balls are turning into homers more frequently than they have in any of the past 15 spring training seasons. Plus, the average hit distance this spring was 4 feet longer than it was in 2020 regular season. Average fly ball distance was 10 feet longer. Even the average exit velocity is up. So it's all so weird. They implement this ball and it's not doing, what they thought it would, or, if it was supposed to suppress home runs, it didn't do its job. But I mean, maybe, this StatCast data they were compiling is being used to finish the new ball, and what we saw in spring training isn't yet the official new ball. But really, what I'm hoping is that the article, like ESPN and other ones like it, that are reporting the new ball will drastically kill scoring, I hope it catches on and everyone, including odds makers, start to buy into this and hopefully gives us value on betting overs. And maybe once again, what happened, this spring training season continues over to the regular season and we see the same amount of home runs or scoring. Now, speaking of betting totals, I want to get into how we approach betting over-unders in baseball. I'm going to switch over to some pitching here. When we're looking to break down betting baseball totals, there's a bunch of different factors we should be considering. But just please don't compare like each starter's ERA and bet unders with two good pitchers or overs with two bad pitchers. Trust me, the odds makers know the pitchers' ERAs, so don't fall into that trap. Try to disregard the simple stats. Dig a little deeper into like relevant matchup information. What pitcher skill sets they have rather than their ERA. A lot of times, short-term stats can be worthless. Finding each starter's strengths and weaknesses and how they match up against the opposing offense. You want to account for righty-lefty splits too, and maybe combine them with ballpark dimensions and weather. For example, you don't want to bet an under with a right-handed pitcher, facing a lineup stacked with left-handed pull power batters in a stadium with a short porch in right field like Yankee Stadium with the wind blowing out. I mean, that's just every possible factor working against you. That would be about the worst situation to bet an under. And there's a ton of free data sets and websites that show all this information, including, wind direction and humidity. And I'll list some of these sites in the Discord community so you guys can check them out. But really, all this info is easily available. You just got to kind of dig and do some work. And like I always say, if it was easy, everyone would do it, Also, remember to incorporate middle relief into your analysis. That's so important in today's game more than ever. Poor bullpens will kill underbets. Elite bullpens can overcome a poor starter's performance and, save an under if the manager makes a move at the right time. But these starting pitchers, they're not going as deep into games like they once did. Really, it's the bullpens that are, pitching the majority of games nowadays. So how much should we be weighing starting pitching with totals if, they're only pitching a third of the game sometimes? And lastly, kind of do your best to wait until starting lineups are announced, before placing your bet. This is always tricky because it's a delicate dance on, between waiting for lineups and getting the best price. But some of the healthier teams, they're fairly predictable on their lineup, and it's okay to bet early if there's, no chance a star is going to take the day off. But the last thing you want to do is bet an over, and then you see, the slugger on both teams, taking the day off and getting a rest break. But if you're following closely, you can kind of get a good idea on the rest patterns. But another interesting bet option that I'm going to be focusing on this year is that of team totals. Betting team totals, like the over-unders of team totals, what I like is it really, can reduce the number of variables that you have to consider. The downside with team totals a lot of times is some books increase the juice and charge minus 115 or minus 120 on team totals. And the reason books often don't get like enough two-way action on these types of bets, so they have to put limits on them too. But also markets that have limits that are low usually means like the book isn't as confident in the line they're posting. Team totals like run lines, they'll fluctuate in relation to the money line and the full game total. But unlike run lines, many books don't link them as carefully, and they might even trade them or adjust them completely separately. So for example, if there's a game, like a full game total, catching steam on a main betting line, check whether the team total has been adjusted as well, and, kind of compare it to your book. The success rate on this is larger than you might expect. If you're on top of it, you can catch books adjusting the full game total, but not adjusting the team totals, or if they do, they're doing it very slow, and you can kind of beat the adjustment. But again, this is another reason the books are charging minus 115 or minus 120 to kind of help offset the fact they might misprice team totals. The extra juice is kind of a good reason to be cautious, but team totals are such a good way to not just find value, but to bet on exactly what you like and nothing that you don't. If you like, or if you think one pitcher will be dominant, but worry the other pitcher might have a rough outing, you can just bet the team total rather than, hoping both pitchers perform well enough to keep the game under the full game total. A common mistake I see with uh, betters is with calculating team totals. They often think that the team total should add up to the total for the game, but that's not correct. I mean, if both teams will score 5 or more runs exactly half the time, meaning both teams have a fair team total of 4.5 runs, you could safely bet the game to go over 9.5 at even money, even though the two team totals only add up to 9 runs. Um, that's the way the runs are distributed, and most books make it close to impossible to beat them betting overs. Bettors tend to go over, not realizing that the numbers don't add up the natural way. The thinking is it's possible to score 20 runs in a game, but it's impossible to score less than zero. So, the totals will always be, slightly inflated. Um, a simple rule I try to follow is if two numbers add up to the total or higher, it's safe to go under the team totals and even pay some juice for it. Now, if the two team totals add up to a half run less than the total, it's still okay to go under, but only if the juice is reduced a little bit. And I know this might sound confusing, so I do plan on going over it more with examples or real time examples in the Discord community. Um, and members can kind of ask me questions if some of this wasn't clear. Um, but hopefully this video was helpful and provided some useful information for this upcoming season. If you made it this far in the video, I got a game I really like tomorrow for opening day. I've already bet it, and I'm taking the Reds and Luis Castillo at home over the Cardinals. You should be able to get the Reds at -115. I'm really high on Castillo. He's kind of my NL Cy Young sleeper. Hopefully he gets off to a solid start, but that's going to wrap up this video. I will catch you guys on the next one.